So, hi there, I'm Chuck Sands. Today, I'm here to talk to you about managing and prioritizing your workload. Now, that might not sound like the most exciting thing for us to talk about, but when we think about leadership and leadership development, it's absolutely fundamental to your success. So, I want to talk about a couple of things related to managing and prioritizing your workload. One of them relates to the fact that really one of the challenges we face is a lot of times we don't know what's most important. If you don't know what's most important, then it's really hard to prioritize and make sure you're actually getting the work done that you need to get done. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things today related to this idea. So I'm going to talk about values. I'm going to talk about actually goal setting. We're going to talk about this concept of what are the roles that you play. I'm also going to talk about a weekly compass, weekly planning, and then daily planning. Now that sounds like a lot, but don't worry, I'm actually going to be really brief on each one of them. Because the whole concept is this is a mindset about deciding what is really most important to you. So obviously today I'm focusing on the concept of really professional work and professional development. So the examples I'm going to use relate to work setting, but actually the concepts can actually apply outside of that. But just so you know, the examples I'm going to provide really relate to leadership in a work setting, developing and growing, managing and prioritizing your workload in that kind of setting. So if we say we really need to figure out what's most important, I'm going to use this word, this concept of values. So when we think about values, what are values? So values are really just things that we've decided are most important to us. So I would challenge you as a student to say, have you really defined that for yourself? Have you decided what is most important for you? I find what's interesting is a lot of times I'll be in conversation with people and they'll agree, yeah, values are important. And then I say, well, what are some of your values? And there's this pause because they've never actually articulated them. So my challenge for you as we begin this conversation about workload really starts with what is most important to you. So your values in a work setting. So a couple of examples might be creativity would be a value that I think would be really important to some people. Maybe professionalism is another example of a value. But let me use the concept of creativity, and I'll hit on that as we go through these other steps and as we think about this concept. So for you as a professional, if we're thinking about creativity, you need to articulate, what do I mean by creativity for me in my own workspace? Now, again, you might be thinking, I thought you were talking about workload. I am talking about workload. What I want you to do, though, is I want you to link what's most important to you with the actual work that you're going to do. Okay, so we've defined a value. We've decided this is what we think a value is. And we're going to use creativity as our example. So then we want to take the next step, which is, okay, now I need to actually define some goals. So I said the example earlier when I ask people about values, there's this pause. Another time I get a pause is when I say, well, what kind of goals do you have? And generally, I don't know about you, but a lot of times what I hear are these fairly bland, generic statements like, I want to get better, or I want to get healthy. Those are actually not really goals that we can measure. So one of the things I want you to do is you think about your values and specific goals. Well, goals relate to, or actually good goals are articulated in this particular way. And by the way, these are not all Chuck's ideas. These are ideas I've learned over time. So at the end, I might give you some recommendations on who you might want to go read and learn about. But when we think about goal setting, there's an acronym that I use a lot, and the acronym is actually SMART, S-M-A-R-T. So again, if you're taking notes, and I hope you are, I want you to write that down. So what do we mean by a SMART goal? A SMART goal is specific, it's measurable, it's actionable, it's realistic, and it's time-bound. Now, if we were in person, I would actually ask you to pause, and we would spend some time actually having you write out a goal. But again, if we think about creativity as our value, what I want you to be thinking about is what kind of specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound goal could I write down related to creativity? So again, managing and prioritizing my workload means I need to really decide what's important, and then I need to articulate what are some specific goals that I need to accomplish related to that. So again, how do I link this as I go up and down this ladder of thinking related to productivity? So after I've defined some broad goals related to creativity, one of the things I also need to recognize is I also need to define for you, what are the roles that I play? So maybe in a work setting, you might have multiple roles. You might be a positional leader. You might have a title that says you're a leader, but then you also might be a project manager, very specific to a project. So you need to think about the roles that you play And those roles obviously relate to the goals and then the values that you have set. Because all of us would agree, it really wouldn't make a lot of sense to be involved in a role that doesn't relate to our values. Now, I say that half tongue in cheek because it happens all the time. People are in roles, they may not even know why they're in a role, and they really don't know what is important to them in the context of that role. So again, values, goals, and now we're talking about roles. So in the context of a role of a project manager, I want to be sure that I understand what it is that I'm responsible for. Well, the simple answer to that is, what's the goal? I just spent time writing the goal, so now as the project manager, I'm going to be able to relate those back and forth. So when I think about that, I want you to realize we play multiple roles all throughout our lives. And again, I'm talking about a professional setting here. But even if we took this beyond, really you need to be aware that good psychology tells us if you're playing more than 7 or 8 significant roles in life, you're probably not doing any of them very well. Now, all of us would say we wear this kind of hat or that kind of hat. Well, that's part of the problem when it comes to managing and prioritizing your workload, is because we have too many hats or too many roles. We haven't clearly articulated a goal, and we may not even know what the value is that we're trying to relate back to. So a really, really important component for us. So now let me get into some specifics of how you can apply this. So that what I just shared with you is kind of theoretical background information, but I really believe that kind of information is essential for you to be successful. Because a lot of times, again, we wake up and we turn around and we realize, wow, that person's really busy, that person's really busy, and we wonder, what are they busy doing? In fact, in my role, people tell me all the time, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. And I smile and I say to them, well, actually, I'm glad you're busy because you work here and I want you busy, but I want you busy doing the right thing. So again, thinking about values and goals and roles, are you actually doing the right thing? So now let me talk just a little bit more about some specific details that maybe you can apply in a particular role, and again, tied to a goal and then a specific value. So one of the things I love about Stephen Covey's work, and that's a name I'm going to use a couple of times. Stephen Covey wrote multiple books, but his most famous book is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So a lot of the information I'm sharing actually comes from his work, and so this idea actually comes from him as well. So this idea of a weekly compass. A weekly compass is a great reminder. Well, what do you think of when you think of a compass? It's supposed to guide us. It's supposed to reorient us. Sometimes we may not know which direction we're going, but we pause and we find out, where are we? Where are we? And that's what the weekly compass can do. So what does that have to do with managing and prioritizing your workload? The weekly compass says to me, in my role, what's the most important thing that you need to do in that role this week? Okay, let me turn that in now. Let me just say it as if it were me. What's the most important thing I can do in this role this week? So the weekly compass says, hold on, pause for a moment and really think about what you're projecting into the next week. Now, in a minute, I'm going to get into kind of weekly planning and daily planning, but I don't want to plan my week and I don't want to plan my day if I haven't reoriented what is most important to me. So what's the most important thing I can do in this particular role this week? I have to tell you, it's a revolutionary question if you really think about it. If you actually think about your role as husband or sister or father or brother outside of the professional realm, and you actually ask yourself that question, it actually can change your life. What's the most important thing I can do in my role as a husband this week? Well, maybe it's my wife's birthday, and I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to that. So again, a simple example, managing, prioritizing your workload, it can relate outside of the professional setting as well. So weekly compass, again, what's the most important thing for me to do in my role this week? So then on a very practical level, what I need to do is look at my week, whatever your work setting is, whatever your work schedule is, and I need to make sure that's the most important thing I need to do. Well, I better make sure I have time to get it done. So I hope you see where we're going with this. So instead of all this busyness and frenetic action with little productivity, now I can still have a lot of activity and I'm actually producing something that is beneficial. What is the most important thing I can do in this role this week? So once I've defined that, I put it on the schedule. Tuesday afternoon from 2 to 4, I need time to dream and think creatively because that relates to my goal and it relates to the value of creativity. So why would that be important? Because one of the things I'm challenged with, and like you, I have a very busy schedule, but I actually control my schedule. I don't let it control me. Really important component. Again, manage and prioritize our workload. So, okay, we're past the weekly compass. So we've already defined what do we think of as the most important thing I need to do in the week. Now I'm actually going to plan the rest of the week. And so you've heard of the phrase a big rock. If you haven't, I highly recommend you just go to YouTube, type in big rocks, Stephen Covey, and you'll be able to watch a fantastic video that has great visual imagery about what a big rock actually should be in your life. So a big rock comes out of that weekly compass. What's the most important thing? So I want to make sure that that big rock is on my schedule or on my calendar or in my workflow in some way, shape, or form. One comment there, by the way, this language is totally malleable. You don't have to use the phrase big rocks or compass. I'm really just interested in you understanding the concepts. Okay, so now we have our big rocks. They're on our calendar. Now we need to look at weekly planning. So weekly planning is then designed around the concept of what I need to be doing in the context of what is most important. So here's one of the most important lines I want you to remember. You need to schedule your priorities. Don't prioritize your schedule. Let me say it again. Schedule your priorities. Don't prioritize your schedule. So what do I mean by that? Schedule your priorities is what I just spent the last few minutes talking about. What's most important? Prioritizing my schedule simply means it's already there, and now I'm going to try to figure out, well, maybe I'll do this, maybe I won't do that. I think you can see that's very reactive. It's not very proactive. So what we want to do is we want to be thinking ahead. So as I think about the week, I put in the most important blocks of my time throughout my work schedule, and now I'm ready to get to work. So then the last thing I want to focus on for a couple of minutes is actually the specific daily planning that you can do. And again, as I said, these are just examples, but these are concepts that are really fundamental. And I'll tell you, I've been using them for over 20 years, and I actually don't even think about them anymore. They just happen, and it allows me to be able to think about a year, and then a quarter, and then a month, and then a week, and then a day, and then maybe a 15-minute or a 30-minute time block, all built around these concepts. So daily planning. Daily planning can be something that is overwhelming to some. Some people say, well, I just wake up and I create a to-do list. I'm not necessarily against a to-do list, but I'm not a fan of a to-do list necessarily. What happens a lot of times, this is why, what happens a lot of times is people begin to make a list and then they try to prioritize it in their head while they're making the list. So they start to write, oh, no, that's not the most important. And then they think of the, oh, and then, no, that's not the most important either. And instead, what I would say is write down those tasks that you think you have to do today. And then here's rocket science for you. Then go back and prioritize them. Don't try to prioritize it in your head. You've got too much going on. You're thinking about too many things. So when I think about what's happening, I look at my day. I usually spend about 3 minutes doing this because, again, if I followed these steps going back 6 months, today is not a surprise. I know what the most important thing is that I'm focused on, and now I can begin to list a very specific set of tasks that relate to what? To me accomplishing the goal that relates to my value. So you can see we're going up and down here, not complicated at all, but it does take some time for you to think about that. So again, back to the task list, the daily things that you want to accomplish. You just simply write them down. What are those tasks that are going to help you accomplish your goal? And then you can go back and prioritize them any way that you want. I use a really, really simple system. I use A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. So if it's an A item, that means it needs to be done first. And A1 means what? That means it's going to be the very first thing. It's the most important thing that I need to accomplish on the task list. If you're listening, you're hearing similar language. The most important thing for the week is on the schedule. The most important thing for the day is on the task list. And now I've just designated it as most important. Again, I use really simple communication like that. A1, A2, A3. Okay, now B. B means what? Okay, it's important, but it doesn't necessarily have to be done right now. So then B1, B2. You can use whatever mechanism you want, but the simpler the better, because simplicity is the secret to seeing things clearly. And when you and I are trying to manage and prioritize our workload, one of the challenges we face is there's just too much. So we really want to be simple and clear. when we try to communicate in that way. So then I have my daily task list. I have ABC 1, 2, 3. I begin working my way through the list. And then on my calendar, now I have a designated amount of time to work on that bigger project, that big important thing. And again, if I circle back, weekly compass, then back to weekly planning, you've just put some blocks of time on the calendar. Obviously, then you have other time throughout the day. And many times what happens is we just fill those with random things. For some people, it's social media. Some people, it's too much email. Maybe for a lot of you, it's Netflix and you watch 7 episodes in a row because you didn't have something scheduled. Okay, those are personal examples. And I said we were talking about the professional setting. Same thing happens professionally. We can get in an email conversation and we're emailing 6, 7, 8 times. Instead of picking up the phone, it would have taken 30 seconds. Or maybe I'm just reading something that really isn't tied to what's most important. So again, for me, that's why the task list really, really helps. I'll admit to you, even though I know this stuff literally off the back of my hand, there are days when I look up and it's 1 o'clock and I realize I didn't create my task list for the day. No wonder I feel scattered. No wonder I'm not sure, what have I actually accomplished today? So managing and prioritizing your workload is so fundamental to actually your personal success, your role as a leader, and then also for the people that spend time with you, they work with you, and certainly if they report to you. So just a quick summary for you again. Managing and prioritizing workload. We talked about values. We talked about goal setting, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound goals. And then after that, we talked about the roles, weekly compass, weekly planning, daily planning. So you can see these are basic ideas, and that's why they're so successful. Because if we try to make it too complicated, we try to get too sophisticated, you know what's tempting? We get lost in the minutia and we miss out on the opportunity to be productive by simply using these tools. So my encouragement for you, recognize what is most important, move your work in that direction, and begin thinking about it in this very, very systematic yet simplistic way. So thanks for letting me share with you today.